Today on the pod, I talk with TJ Blanton, the head baseball coach at Sandusky St. Mary's Central Catholic. Coach Blanton talks about playing sports as a kid, his recruiting process to Bowling Green State University, and the best players he played with and against. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Bases Loaded podcast. I'm your host, Gabe Kennedy, and today my guest is TJ Blanton. Coach, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. So how old are you and what's your profession?
I'm 32 years old. I'm a physical therapist in Sandusky, and I'm also the head baseball coach of Sandusky St. Mary's Central Catholic.
Good deal. So how has, the whole pandemic stuff, how has that impacted your job being a physical therapist?
Well, I think it's affected everybody in the healthcare field, differently, some more than others. I think during, the beginning of the pandemic, we were okay. Caseload was still the same. And then, you started hearing the news and people were panicking and then they didn't want to go outside. And so we started to kind of slow down a little bit. And then once they stopped doing, outpatient surgeries, that really slowed us down. So we were kind of hanging on there for a while, had to lay off or furlough a couple employees. And then, it actually picked up really fast once the surgery started back up, because these doctors, they were trying to get their money back, I think. And all these people that were, waiting to get a total knee or a shoulder or a hip or anything, they had to wait that extra 3-4 months, and, not good when you're already in pain. And then you have to, prolong it another 4 to 5 months when you've already probably waited a year. So that's, now we pick back up pretty well. And I think, across the field, medical fields kind of pick back up, and kudos to those that are out there, especially the front line and, people that have to deal with COVID every day. And, luckily I don't see, that in the clinic. We probably have had people walk through that have had it, but, that's the thing with this. You just don't know. And, we'll see a patient go missing for a couple of weeks and you just assume, hey, they might have COVID now, and they come back and tell you about it. And so far, we've all been healthy, so that's a good thing. And hopefully we're starting to get a grip on this.
Absolutely. So obviously you being a head baseball coach for Sandusky St. Mary's Central Catholic, that's why, we got you here on the pod, but you've obviously played a lot of sports throughout your life. Let's take it back to your childhood. What was it like growing up, being around sports for you personally?
Yeah, when I was young, we didn't have the technology of today. So it was go outside and play and come back in when the street lights turned on. So, I grew up in a good neighborhood where there was a lot of kids. And then, my family friends, they all played sports, and that was pretty much it. We were either out building forts, wrestling in the streets, or we were playing football, baseball, whatever it was. Actually your cousins, the Upfers, their backyard was the premier baseball stadium for for our age. You had the green monster in left field over the house, and then you had a car dealership in right field. So you try to go apple a lot just so you could hit the cars with the tennis ball, and or you could put it over the house, which I used to. I got to that point where I started being able to do that, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, I was influenced a lot by like my brother. He was 9 years older than I was. He played 3 sports, 4, different sports growing up. And so being 9 years younger, you get to go to all that stuff and watch, and everybody looks huge then. I mean, it's funny how when you're little, the high schoolers, they just look huge. And then you get to, college kids look huge, and NFL kids, and then you're like my age and you look back, you're like, man, that's wow, they're so young. But yet the NFL, those guys are still huge. But, it's just funny how that goes. But looking back, I never wanted to, let people down, I guess you could say. Watching my brother through all the sports, he did well. He ended up going to college to play football at Butler University. So, I wanted to follow. I wanted to be, that was kind of my goal, was, I wanted to do well in the sports he did well in. And, everyone thought, how great of an athlete he was. And then I think I came by, I'm the youngest one, so I came by and stole the show at the end, I think.
So 9 years age gap. That's pretty significant. So were you like you had to have been like the annoying little brother trying to follow him around, right?
Oh, absolutely. It didn't matter what it was. If he had friends over, I would sneak down the steps and they'd see me just like staring at him and they'd be like, all right, you can come down. So in a way, it was kind of cool because, when the girls or, his friend girls came over, they all wanted to play with, they were like, oh, let him do it. And he's just like, oh God, here we go. Uh, then I had a sister. She's 6.5 years older than me, so it was us three. So I was pretty much annoying to her too. So it's looking back. I see if I had a 9-year-old sibling younger than me, it probably would have been a little. But once I got to high school, once I was older, matured, it really we became so much closer. Because when you're 9 and he's 18, or you're 9 and she's 16, there's nothing in common. You have nothing in common there, other than the family time. But I couldn't sit there and talk to him about sports, or I couldn't talk to her about cheerleading or track, and nobody cared. But once you got to high school, that was I could he could we had deeper conversations about sports and life and everything. So that was pretty cool. So I think later on I got to catch up on that.
Absolutely. So for you, who were some major influences in your life growing up?
Definitely my parents, siblings. My dad, for anybody that listens who knows, my dad was a very hardcore sports, wrestling, football, hated baseball. I think he still does. He just accepted it because I played it. It's actually funny because we sit and argue about bunting. He is so opposed to bunting, and I think it was an Indians game, maybe in the playoffs, and I was watching it with him, and the Indians got like first and second, and they bunted him over, and then they got a sack fly and won the game. And I was like, "You see?" And he's like, I don't care. That's not baseball." But he was always the one to kind of he didn't push me to into sports, but he always wanted me to play. And then obviously I talked about my brother. I just wanted to follow in his footsteps. Didn't want to let him down, kind of attitude. Then the biggest one, my mom, my parents were divorced when I was 9. So, that's difficult as a 9-year-old. And that was when my brother was going to college. So, I didn't really have a male. It was me, my mom, and my sister. So I kind of became the man of the house at 9 years old, 10 years old there. But she took me everywhere. Any sport I wanted to play, I played. Anything I wanted, she got. If it was a new glove, new cleats, she worked 7 different jobs. She did accounting, so she worked small jobs here and there for tax season and everything. So, but she never missed a game. She missed one. We can talk about that, but she, throughout high school, she was at everything. Every tournament I played in, and it was a lot. Summer baseball in high school, we played every night almost in the summer, and then I'd go to football. And it was just constant wrestling tournaments across the state, across the Midwest. But it was so she didn't miss much, and without her, I probably wouldn't have been as successful or where I got to be.
Good stuff, man. So which sports did you play in high school, and was baseball your favorite?
I was a 3-sport athlete. So I played football, I wrestled, and I played baseball. Um, I don't think it's funny we talked about this, but baseball probably wasn't my favorite to begin with. Football was probably always my favorite sport. And wrestling, I started wrestling when I was 4. My dad stuck me out on the mat at the Paul tournament in Sandusky, and I cried, and that was it. I didn't wrestle another tournament until I was 6. So I wasn't ready to wrestle, I don't think. But, he put me out there, and the nice thing was he didn't push me to keep going with it. But I started wrestling at 4. I went to practices, throughout. So that was probably the sport that you know, it's weird being a wrestler. You love it and you hate it. And more times than not, you hate it. Um, so I grew up with that my entire life. So I got to play that my whole life, which was, you can start at a young age there. Not that you can't with baseball. I played t-ball. I played flag football, but just seemed like with wrestling, we traveled everywhere when I was young. And that was the thing. We had a motorhome, and those were the fun times. The rides was the best part. The rides there. And then we actually realized, oh man, we have to wrestle. This stinks. But we had a pretty good program. So, it started when we were young. Growing up, though, football was kind of my love. You know, 7th, 8th grade, I became really, you know, I wanted to play football. I wanted to follow my brother and be a quarterback, but at the time I was a running back and I had a good arm, so they're like, "You're a quarterback." And then you know, through high school, I played wide receiver, quarterback, and I had a pretty good senior year, pretty good junior year, but my senior year was, you know, really good to the point that I started getting recruited to play football, and you know, that's what my first thought was. I wanted to play Division I football, um, and for some reason, Miami of Ohio was my dream, to play Division I football at Miami of Ohio. I don't know why. It's weird. You know, I don't know. I think I saw him on TV a few times, and you know, Ben Roethlisberger from Ohio was there, and you know, I thought I could do that. But then you know, summer of my junior season, you know, and that's when your body starts to change. I started lifting a lot. I started working out. I started doing, you know, more sport oriented things, and I really took off in baseball. And that's we had a Legion team out of Sandusky, and it's, you know, I can run through the people on that team, but there were 10 guys on that team that won Division I.
Wow.
And that's all from the same area code. So our Legion team was good, but my junior year, you know, the coach was from Perkins. I'm from St. Mary's, and that's a rivalry that was pretty bitter back then. Nowadays, you know, we're allies, we're friends, but back then that was a pretty bitter rivalry, and they didn't accept many St. Mary's people on that team.
I was gonna say, so who started that relationship? Who started talking to who there?
You know what, they called me and asked me to be on the team, but I think there were some other coaches that, you know, basically said, you got to get this kid on your team. You know, you're an idiot if you don't have him on your team.
Even though he's a St. Mary's guy, you got to call him, right?
Yeah, I think exactly. And then hopefully, you know, he'll listen to this and he'll probably give me a call at some point. But you know, Neal, he's a legend in Ohio. He's, you know, in the Hall of Fame for the coaches. He actually just took over Margaretta, and now I get to coach against him, which is going to be cool. So. But yeah, back to that, he accepted me on this team, and then I realized, wow, this is a different level of baseball. You know, I was used to playing, you know, my high school, and I'm not saying we weren't good and didn't have good coaches, but like you get to there and you play with 10 other kids that are going to Division I, and it's a different level. So we actually got accepted into the Black Swamp tournament, which, if you know anything about baseball, you know, northern area, Northwest Ohio, the Black Swamp tournament is a huge tournament out of Bowling Green. And we were a Legion team, but they said we couldn't do it because we were a Legion team. So they made us combine with another Legion team. So we combined with Anthony Wayne that year. And basically everyone, and you know, they wrote us off as, oh, this is a Legion team. They won't do anything. We ended up winning that tournament. And then people kind of got a fuss about it because we were a Legion team, but yet other teams were, you know, forming players from Cincinnati, Cleveland, Toledo, Ann Arbor, you know, but we beat them. But it was that semifinal game we were playing A Green. That's the team. They're out of Michigan. I actually hit for the cycle. I think I was 5 for 5 or 6 for 6, and we were playing at Stellar Field, so Bowling Green's college stadium, and that was pretty cool. You know, you're a high school kid, and you're like, wow, this is a college field. This is cool. The grass is cut different. You know, there's no lips. There's a bump on the mound, and the bases were white. It was a cool thing. But I hit for the cycle, and there were a lot of scouts there, and I was oblivious to that at the time. You know, I coming from a small school, you didn't know much about that. You know, I knew about it, but I didn't think, there's 20 scouts in the stadium. But you know, we got done with that game, and Neal actually looked at me. He's like, I think I'm going to rest you for the finals because you're going to be busy on Monday. And I just kind of looked at him. He's like, he had to explain. He's like, you were going to be on the phone all day Monday, you know, talking to scouts, or not scouts, but talking to colleges. And he was right. It was crazy. I think I had a 7-on-7 Monday, and I came home from practice. My mom's like, you're going to want to sit down for this. And she went through the caller ID back when caller ID was a cool thing.
Oh yeah.
There was like 27 schools. So I just started listing them down. I'm like, well, I have to call them all back. And she's like, oh yeah. I'm like, uh-oh. So that kind of started it. That's when I realized, like, I can play with these guys. You know, I'm good enough. And then other people started, and you know, I'm humble, but other people always told you, you're good enough. You're good enough. And I just didn't know it until that moment. And that's when it kind of sprung that, yep, baseball's my thing. And that's when the whole recruiting process started.
Good deal. So that goes right into the next question. How did you decide on Bowling Green to play college baseball? Explain the process a little bit of deciding on Bowling Green?
It came down to, the feel. I think anybody that's recruited, you get there, you meet with the coaches, you see the facility, and you go through the school, and you just get that feel that you want to be there. I went on plenty of recruiting visits to different colleges. In Bowling Green, it just felt right. I think I felt comfortable with what they told me, in terms of who was there, the team wise, what they were trying to build, and my position that would be on the team. And they kind of told me, we want you to be a starter pretty early on. Like, that was the goal. In other schools, I had my dream of playing football at Miami of Ohio switched to my dream was to play baseball at Michigan. That's a pretty drastic change. So that was the original goal when I started getting all these calls was, I can't wait to see Michigan pop up on the caller ID, and one day they did, and it really, they, I think, offered like preferred walk on, and Michigan cost a whole lot of money to go to. So financially, it was a lot better decision. That was one thing that played into it was, financially, it was a good fit. I got a good scholarship. Academically, I got money for that, which was huge. The distance from home was a big thing. I wanted my family to be able to come and watch. That was a big thing. And then, just that feel of after the recruiting process, after I went on the visit, the way the coaches talked to me, that really sold me on the school.
Absolutely. So what advice would you give kids, no matter what the sport, but kids that want to get recruited and play a sport in college? What advice would you give them?
The biggest thing would be it is your choice. That is the number one thing. At the end of the day, what you decide is your choice. It can't be you want to go to a school because your grandpa went to that school, and you just, people are forcing you to that school. And it's crazy seeing the recruiting process nowadays compared to back then. And it's only 15 years ago or 14 years ago that I was getting recruited, but now you stick a video up and you're throwing 95 miles per hour, and you got 10 Division I huge powerhouse schools calling you. So the whole process is a little different, but you got to have that feel, and when I think that's the coaching aspect. You gotta like the coaches, because trust, they're your bosses for the next 4 years. You have to like the school, because that's the first thing. You got to go to school. If you're not academically prepared, you don't play. So finding, if you know what you want to do, you better make sure that school has your program. So that's one thing. And then you have to be ready for the grind of that process. I can explain, like, kind of, I would come home from football practice, I'd go to school, practice, maybe lift, come home at 6 or 7, eat quick, and I'd be on the phone for 2 or 3 hours. And that was just me. And at that time, I can only imagine a 5-star football recruit at this point. They're probably on the phone for all day long, all night, and it gets taxing. It's wearing. You don't have time to talk to your friends, or when you're on that phone with that guy, it's your job interview for the rest of your life. The school calls you that you want to go to, you may have 15 minutes to make that impression. And if you don't make the right one, that might be it. That might be the last time you talk to that school. So you can't just get on the phone and not want to talk to them and not be excited about it. That's the big thing. Like I said, it's your interview. That could be your ticket to your future. So every call has to be important, and you really have to sell yourself. They see what you do on the field, but you have to sell yourself personally, because they don't want some just dud. There's a lot of people that are out there that are really good athletes that great, you're a great athlete, but you're not a team player. You can't communicate. You're not good in school, and that's the biggest thing. Grades are first. If you don't have the grades, you might as well just forget about it. Especially now in baseball with the amount of scholarship money and all of that, grades play a huge factor in the recruitment process. And if they can get you some academic money, that definitely helps their cause.
Absolutely. So when did you know that you wanted to be a head baseball coach?
I think I always wanted to be a part of the game. and when I was not able to play anymore, that part of the game is coaching, or teaching kids to hit or teaching them the throwing mechanics. And I like the small things like that, the little technique, the little switch your foot here, raise your elbow here. And I actually went back to my high school. I was home actually studying for my board exams. I think it was for physical therapy, passed my national exam and went out to a couple practices, and they had a good team. They had a lot of talent on the team. And I just felt like, there were some things that they probably could have been coached better on, or, I think, not saying the coach was bad. I just think, there were definitely they needed a little bit more structure than they had. They still had a good season, but I think with a little bit more of, the X's and O's that most kids don't like, they would have been a little bit more successful. And so he kind of asked me, hey, do you want to stick along and, kind of help out? And so I kind of became an assistant for the next 2 years. And then after that 2 years, he told me, he was stepping down. He was going to, take on a lighter role. And, said, if you want to, take over for me, I'll put in a good word for you. And I don't know if he didn't know that I went to that school and had a pretty good career. And, but the AD at the time basically called me that night and was like, hey, if you want this job, it's yours. Come in, let's interview and make sure everything, we can cross off everything we need to cross off, and, see if it's the right fit for you. So that went well. And, I've been here since, and, I'm definitely happy I did it.
Was that a no-brainer though? It's your school. Obviously, you were already there. You graduated from there. You're living there. Was it a no-brainer when that job was open that you want to be a head coach, or was it something you really had to sit back and be like, all right, is this really what I want to do?
I think it was a no-brainer. Really, the biggest thing that played into it was how would it fit in with my future, with my career. How am I going to be able to work and do this? Am I going to be able to, work a full-time shift, and what are my hours going to be? And even now, my work fluctuate. They move the schedule. They let me move my schedule around a little bit to make it to games. Luckily for me, I have some good assistants, because there's some practices that I can't make just because of my work schedule. And when you're at a small school like that, they know that obviously the work comes first for me. And then when I can be there, I'm there, and I'm there as much as I can be. But I think it was a no-brainer. Yeah. Yeah. Everyone always says, like, you could be making so much more money at this. And it's, that's definitely not what it's about. I'm not here to make money coaching. I just want to pass on, even if it's something that, not even related to the game of baseball, if I can pass that on to a kid. And I feel like I've seen a lot, so I can, whether it's, hey, this is a good fit for you to fit into school, and it might not be athletically, academically. I'm always open up. I tell my kids they can text, they can call, they can email me to talk about anything. It's not just about baseball, and that's what I think high school sports is about. It's being part of a team, but it's definitely more than that, because most of these kids, they're not going on to play at the next level. I don't know what are the statistics, like 7% of high school kids go to college, and after that it's like 0.01 go on to a professional career. So I got to mold them into being good business people, good husbands, good fathers, good workers. It's just that's kind of my job, and I like that. That's the aspect that I like the most.
Good stuff. For you, I guess as an athlete, and I guess as a coach too, are there any games you'd like to have back, or I guess sports moments, since wrestling isn't a game, but anything you'd like to have back as a player or coach?
So there's a couple. I think I have probably one in each sport. The first one was a career changer for me. Was a wrestling match my sophomore year. I think I was in the finals of a tournament that didn't mean anything. We had a really good wrestling team that year. I think we were ranked like 15th in the nation, and that's coming from a small school. We were stacked. I think we sent 10 or 11 kids to state that year, and we walked away with the state title. And so I was wrestling just for our team, it was our B team. And it, for other schools, they went to these tournaments. That was, their varsity tournament. So it was definitely against varsity kids. I shouldn't say it wasn't, but at the time I was just wrestle in that tournament for some reason. I was in the finals and I was in the down position, and a kid like optional started, and he just crashed back down onto my elbow and my throwing elbow that, and it dislocated, popped backwards, and I stood up, my arm was facing the other way. I grabbed it, pulled it back in and shook it. And I was like, you know what? Feels all right. Feels all right. And about a minute later into that match, it felt like my heart beating through that arm. And by the time that match was over, my elbow was probably the size of my head. So I went to the doctor and broke it. I actually ended up having an MRI and had a torn ulnar collateral ligament. So, that's Tommy John. And at the time, the doctor I went to Chicken Dance, who was I saw Chicken Dance Kepler. I saw all the big dogs in Cleveland that were the Indians doctors at the time. And they basically told me it was an 18-month recovery, which nowadays you can get through that in 9 months. But I've had a couple that I treated, and if it was 9 months, I would have done it. But 18 months, I would have missed my entire junior year and the rest of my sophomore year. So I wouldn't have played, and probably wouldn't have had the opportunity. So what I did, I was a pitcher and a catcher at the time, and so I just moved to outfield because it was less throws. But that whole entire year, I played first base. But that's one moment I would have just forfeited that match and cruised through the sunset with a nice healthy arm, hopefully. So that changed a lot of things. I lived on some different types of corticosteroids, pain medications through college. And the funny thing was, I never told my college coaches. They didn't know. They had no clue. But I'd be in miserable amount of pain. After I make like 5 throws in a row, I would just sit there and say, please don't hit me the ball. And my teammates all knew it. And
so your coaches had no idea?
I mean, I think they figured it out after like my sophomore year or junior year. The trainer was like, his arm's just basically shot. And I was like, yeah, but I'm hanging out. I still have my rotator cuff. I'm good. So it was funny because the doctor I had from the Cleveland Clinic, he kind of gave me a regimen of different medications to take that normally people wouldn't in that order, just to kind of get through a weekend. He'd say, normally we would give people this every day, but for you, let's dose up on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and get you through the weekend. And that worked. So that's good. But yeah, that wrestling match, I actually got to wrestle that kid again my senior year at state, and I took care of him in the first period pretty quick. So that was payback. I think baseball-wise, the one game that I would want back would have been my senior year. It was the last game I ever played. We were playing Central Michigan. We were up 9-5 or 9-6 in the 9th inning. Semifinals of the MAC tournament. If we win that game, we go on to play Kent State, which that was our rival. I think at the time that was the game of Ohio. Like, people wanted to see BG versus Kent State. People traveled to watch that series. We had some, back and forth battles, and some of my good friends played for Kent, and and then obviously my teammates at BG. We went to war in those games. But we were up 9-5, 9-6, and I think we got the first kid out of the inning, and it's like, all right, 2 more outs, and I'm looking around the outfield like, hey, 2, we're into the finals, and then it just hit the fan, man. We had like a walk, a hit batter. I think it was crazy. It was just like a little flare single into over the first baseman's head, and before you knew it, it was 9-6, and it was 9-7. It was bases loaded. Then I think we got an out. It was 9-7, bases loaded, 2 outs. And a kid hits just a laser. I'm playing center field. This hits a missile right at me. And if you've ever played the outfield, it's like you have that split second of you go back, you go in. I made the right read of going in. And it's either I make a extended Foley dive out in front of me and catch it, I go down and block it, or I totally miss. The ball goes to the fence and the game's over anyways. So I was going to catch it. And it's funny because I heard the crack of the bat, and I heard my third baseman just yell, no, because he knew I was going for it. So, literally last second, I, dropped to my knees, pull up, and just let the ball drill me in the chest, off the turf. We were in Chillicothe. So it hit in front of me, bounced off. I knocked it down, threw it in, and the game was still tied. If I make that catch, we win the game. If it goes over my head, so I, either way I could be talking about it, but that moment right there, it's like, I still dream about that I could have made that catch for sure. And it's, we talk about it when we go back to golf outings and whatnot, and they're like, you made plenty of plays in your career that, that one wasn't the big thing. But in my mind, if I make that catch, who knows? We end up winning that game, and maybe we win the MAC tournament. And I think that year they went out and played. This is a good one. They went out and played UCLA, I think, and this Kent State did. The starting pitchers for UCLA were Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole.
Jeez.
So yeah, that was their rotation. And Kent State actually beat them game one. I think they beat Garrett Cole, which is, pretty big thing to do. And
yeah, I was saying,
yeah.
I would have had a lot different questions on this pod if you would have, maybe dove and made that catch, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I know. That's a moment, you have those dreams where, you feel like there's buckets on your feet and you're running. I have that dream still of me, like I can hear the bat, I can hear him saying my name. I don't hear anything else, but I just have sand buckets on my feet and I can't get to the ball. And that's pretty much what it felt like at the time. But it's just funny now how you dream about that. It's like, man, things come back to haunt you.
Jeez. Well, sorry to bring that up, Coach.
I could go on and on, but no, we'll leave it at that.
Right. So for Sandusky St. Mary's, this spring, it's looking like we should be good to go with baseball season for high school starting up in the next month or so. So who would you say on your team this year has a lot to prove for you guys?
So my team, this is going to be a strange year. My team is young. When I started coaching, we had 14 kids on the team. My second year, we had 17. My third year, I think we were up to 19. Last year, we had 28 signed up. So it was the first year that we were able to have a JV team, and I was excited because when you have 19 kids on a team, you can't play, it's just you can't play JV and varsity. So there's a lot of kids that had to sit and wait, and then kids would not come back because they didn't get to play. But it's a very hard thing because varsity baseball, kids are ready for that and kids aren't ready for it. And a lot of freshmen aren't ready for that. And I don't want to throw a kid in there just to, because his mom or grandma wants him to have playing time. It's not fair to him to get, our league, there's some pretty good studs in it. We had a kid that was the Gatorade player of the year to throw a 94 miles per hour. That was a full ride to Louisville a couple of years ago. And I always tell that story, like, did you want me to throw your, grandson in that game? Because that, it wouldn't have been pretty for him. That's a memory he wouldn't have, liked to have. But and then obviously last year I had a good senior class. I was looking forward to it. A couple of them were coming back out of injury. I had arms, and then obviously what happened. And so it's just crazy because this year's senior class, the last time they played, team game, they were sophomores, and that difference of, like I said earlier, the change in the body from sophomore to junior to senior year, the change in your mental state of, I can actually do this now. So when you miss that, that's a pivotal year, your junior year, your sophomore year. When you miss that year, you don't have that time to grow. You don't have that time to make mistakes, to learn that you won't make again. So we're going to have mistakes that seniors are making this year that, sophomores will be making. And that's a lot of it is, every team's going to have that. It's just going to be, can we overcome that? I'm going to have sophomores that have never stepped on a varsity field and thrown, 60.6 feet or ran 90-foot bases, have never made the throw from third to first on 90-foot bases, and they're going to be sophomores. So that's, it's going to be a challenge, but I like that. I definitely have some young kids that are, I need some of my sophomores to step up that were freshmen last year. I need my seniors. I have two seniors that have played 25 or more games. Other than that, nobody has played more than 25 games on my roster. So, varsity action. So I'm definitely going to need, the senior class has to be leaders. My junior class really has to step up because they haven't played since their freshman year, and a lot of them didn't get to play. So it's really hard to judge. I have some talent. It's just a matter of getting them out there, seeing where they'll fit. I got a lot of the same position guys that we're going to have to move. And that's high school. That's high school sports. Sorry, you're going to have to try this position or that position. And, if you can get out there, you hit the ball, you catch the ball, and you can throw the ball, you're probably going to be able to play. So it's going to be a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it. We have a pretty tough conference. We used to play in the SBC back when I was in school, and 8 teams. So then we branched off with 3 different divisions, and it's funny because my first year was like, okay, we're playing like New Regal and Old Fort, and I don't even know these. Location wise, where are some of these schools even at? New Regal, I know they have great ribs. That's what I knew about New Regal before they were in our conference. They come out with 2 Division I arms on their team. One goes to Louisville, one goes to Ohio State, and I'm thinking, well, okay, this is great. Tiffin Calvert always has a good baseball, background, but they have 2 Division I Kent State players on their team the one year, and then Old Fort last year has a kid going division. Every year these arms that we're seeing, I'm just like, where are these kids coming from? Just out of nowhere, but that's the beauty of baseball because it's everywhere. That's why I like listening to this podcast in general, because there's so much just across the state of Ohio. There's so much talent out there, and it doesn't matter what school you're from, you have a chance to make it if and if you're good, they'll find you.
Absolutely. So who are some of the best players you ever played with or against? When we did our pre-pod, you were kind of name dropping some dudes, and I'm like, holy smokes, I got to ask you. So I'm sure you're going to leave people out, but who would you say that some of the best players are you played with or against?
So playing with, right now, BG has one that was on my team. He's currently playing for the Marlins, John Birdie. He's a utility guy. He was, it's funny because he came in and I was an outfielder, and he had played shortstop his whole life. And he was drafted in like the 35th round out of high school, and he was our coach's nephew, which is crazy. So we're all thinking like, oh God, here we go. Like this kid's going to come in and just be like, but he like complete opposite. He was, one of the hardest working kids on the team. He's like 5'10", but he runs like a 6'5" flat. He can absolutely fly. He was leading the majors in stolen bases this year at one point. But watching him, I actually got to help groom him into an outfield. He had never played outfield in his life. He was a shortstop, just naturally. And that's where he ended up playing. But his freshman year came in, and they were like, we have to get this kid on the field. So can you teach him how to play the outfield? I was like, all I got to do is learn how to make the reads. And so I acted like I was teaching a little bit. So I still want to take some of the credit when he, if you watch YouTube, go on YouTube and type in John Birdie, Miami Marlins, you'll see some of these catches in the outfield. It's like, wow, the dude's still a dude. And, he can hit, he can, for 5'10", I don't know, he might even be 5'9". They might be giving him some inches on the, but he absolutely flies around the bases. He's fun to watch. He's just a competitor. But the teammate wise, that was the one that is still playing. Some of the guys I played against, I kind of wrote down some of them. I definitely will forget some of them, but like one of the big ones, George Springer. He was, obviously everyone knows George Springer. He's a dude. Like we were playing UConn, and he played center field and I played center field. And I always thought, I'm the best center fielder of any team we're playing. That was my goal. And I watched this dude from gap to gap, just making diving catches. Like there were balls that no one would even think about catching, and he was underneath them. It's like, who is this guy? And then, obviously comes up through the Astros, and we're like, well, remember when we were all like, that guy? Yeah, the World Series MVP. And yeah, he was, the ball came off his bat a little different. James Paxton played for Kentucky, and Taylor Rogers. They were on the same team. They were 2 stud lefties on the same team. That's not a good day. My freshman year in Miami, Ohio, had John Eli and Connor Graham. Both of them threw 100. So I'm a freshman, and they had a gun on their scoreboard, which was pretty sweet. But it would hit 100, back-to-back days. It's like, wow, this is, and John Eli ended up playing for the Dodgers for, 5, 6, 7 years. Adam Eaton went to Miami. He won a World Series last year with Washington. He was kind of like my rival, I guess you'd say, because we were both outfielders. And BG and Miami, they didn't get along. It was, I don't know why, just we didn't get along with Miami, and those games got pretty dicey sometimes. So, he's one of them. Andrew Chafin, he played at Kent. He was actually on my Legion team. I went to, God, where did he go to high school? I'm trying to think. Drawing up at Western Reserve. but he played Legion ball with us. It was funny because we're like, who's this kid, and he's only throwing 96 and coming off a Tommy John 3 months after at Kent State. So, but he's still playing. He's a relief pitcher. He's pretty set in stone. He's got the best job there is, bullpen guy, out in Arizona. He might have even gotten traded recently. I'm not sure about that. Some other guys like Adam Duvall. He played for Louisville. Josh Colemencher was one of the best pitchers I've seen. He played for Central Michigan. Like Jed Yorko, he played West Virginia. He was a stud. Ryan Lamar was a stud. Travis Shaw played at Kent. He was a stud. It's just the list could go on. One of the funny ones, I played at Golden Tate.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. He actually, this is the bad thing. After my senior year, not him, but I'm trying to think of who was Kent State West Virginia's quarterback.
Pat White.
Yeah, Pat White. He was the last pick in the draft of the baseball.
Yep.
He had been in the NFL for 2 years.
Yep.
That could have been. They could have just taken me for a pair of batting gloves, but they took Pat White, who was already in the NFL for 2 years, and he didn't even play college baseball. So that was a slap in the face. But I think that's funny because Golden Tate, I think he got drafted to play baseball. He was not a very good baseball player. He was just really fast. Yeah. He bunted 3 times against us. Like we played Notre Dame, he bunted 3 times. We're just like, what is he? Why is he even out here? Well, yeah, and he got on first base. I think he got on 1 time, but he literally bunted and just ran. And once he got on base, that was it. He's stealing because he's fast as can be. But it was just funny because what a character he was, and probably no business being out there for baseball, but he was such a good football player. They're like, yeah, we got to keep him on the team, and he's free. He's a free body because he's got a full ride for football, and he's going to the NFL. And he was just a character, a goofball before the game. He's sitting there telling stories and just a funny dude in general. And it was just like, why is he out here? But I'm sure he had some good moments there. But obviously on the football field, he's a stud. But that was just a funny one that I played against.
So what would you say your favorite baseball field that you've ever played on was? Obviously you played on a lot of different fields, high school, college. I'm sure you've coached on some good fields too. What would you say ranks up there at the top of your list?
I would say like Louisville was one of the better. I just like that their football stadium is right in the backdrop of right field. They have the Kentucky Derby horses on their fence. They got the banners for all their World Series on there, and it's a cool stadium. They had I think it was a frat house or something in left field, and like there was like 25 people just standing on the roof just partying during the game, which is pretty cool. And then obviously the Kentucky Derby is right across the street, so that's pretty cool. Louisville Sluggers right down the road. Just a pretty cool baseball, in general town atmosphere, and they're good. They were always good, top 10 team. So that was a pretty cool stadium. I'm a Michigan fan. Yes, they don't have a good football team. For everyone listening, we know Jim Harbaugh's back. We know that too. But hey, it's time for some change. Mike Hart's coming back. Maybe that'll make a difference. But I still stick true to him. And yes, I know the Ohio State's beaten them 50 of the last 50 years. So, but their stadium, I like playing up there in Ann Arbor. Just the campus in general I just like their campus, the whole setup, their sports facilities all right there. I think that's pretty cool. They have a nice baseball facility. And then we talked about before the big one. I actually had to look up the name. It's called Huntingburg League Stadium, and that's where this was summer ball. I played out in Illinois, but we played the Dubois County Bombers. So their stadium is the stadium that is on a league of their own. So like where Tom Hanks drinks out of the drinking fountain. That drinking fountain was in our dugout, and there's like a tunnel, and that led up to this really, really small locker room, and it was like 105 degrees. We were playing a double header there, and they have Rockford peaches that's still painted on the wall out in left field. So that's pretty cool. That was a pretty cool. We all had to pull out our phones and like re-look up, pictures from the movie. We're like, yep, this is definitely it.
Dude, that is awesome. No matter what you do throughout your life, good, bad, or great or horrible, they can't take that away from you, man. You were there, playing on that field. Tom Hanks was there. That is such an underrated movie when you talk about favorite sports movies. Not too many people put A League of Their Own in the top, but you got to play on that field. That's awesome. Not many people can say that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an underrated movie, and I think, with all the movements across the country, I think that the female baseball thing, they need to take people need to take a second look at that and maybe start talking about that movie a little bit more, and then they'll see what field I got to play at too.
Exactly. What would you say? Here's the last question. What would you say? What would you say is your favorite sports movie?
Oh man,
I know that's
movie.
A tough one. I know that's a tough one.
Oh man, I'm a big fan. Like Any Given Sunday is a good one. Man, that is cool. I mean, Bull Durham is just a classic baseball movie, and if you haven't, and it's so underrated. I think that movie's underrated too. We watched that movie every bus trip. Was Bull Durham. So I think there's just lines in there, and college teammates, we can say a one-liner from that movie, and everybody knows what we're talking about.
Sure.
Whereas I can say that, I go to work and say that, everyone looks at me like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Bull Durham, we don't have to sacrifice a live chicken." Like, no, nobody understands that, and people just look at us like, "What?" What should we get for the wedding? And I'll roll that off, and we're just like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Never mind, you won't know if you haven't seen it." But Bull Durham, that's one of mine. Any Given Sunday, that's a good one. God, the football. There's so many good ones. It's so hard to.
What would you say is what would you say is overrated? Because obviously there's some that there's all this hype, and you're like, I just wasn't really into it. Is there any sports movies that you weren't really picking up what everybody else was putting down?
I wouldn't say that. I'm just a sports dude in general. Like, if there's a sport in a movie, I'm like, yep. Like, some of these football movies, you watch some of these guys running, and you're like, could they hire somebody that actually has played sport to actually be in the movie? Because, like, you're watching, and you're just like, that dude's never even ran the ball, like, or thrown a ball in his life, and it just looks so non-realistic. And
it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. It's hard to follow when they're so unathletic. But they can
Yeah.
their lines, so they got the job.
Right. And some of these baseball movies, they like put them out there and like, oh yeah, they trained off a tee for 7 weeks before, and it's like, well, they should have trained longer, because nobody could actually hit that ball. And Major League pops out of my head. That's not an overrated. That's one of the ones that I'm probably one of my favorites. That's a classic. And being an Indians fan, it's you can't overlook that one. That's always a good one. I'm a big fan of like The Blind Side, just that whole story.
Sure.
That's a cool story. Things like that, where that feel good story is pretty cool. So.
Well, what about Rudy? Was Rudy offsides? What do you think? Was he offsides?
Rudy was off. Yeah, he was offsides. I have a lot of Notre Dame friends, and yeah, it's again though, what a cool story.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's a real thing. Like, that dude put his time in and got to be in a game, and that's not a lot of people can say that. I know there's some people that were I saw on Facebook, like, people that were actually in the stands for that game, like, recently posted like, yeah, I was at that game when they filmed that movie. At the end of the game, they put him in, and we all just went nuts. I'm like, really? That was so I didn't know that was actually like a live game. So I guess at the end of the game, they just filmed the movie. I don't know. I'd have to look more into that.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Well, all right, Coach. Thanks a lot for being on the podcast, man, and best of luck to you in the future.
All right. Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoy listening to them, so
appreciate it.
Keep them coming.
Thanks a lot for listening to another episode of the Bases Loaded podcast, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter @Bases Podcast.